Good morning. Thank you all for coming. My name is Ajit Dhavle. I am the Vice President of Clinical Quality at Surescripts, and we have an excellent panel lined up today. Just one quick thing, we had a little bit of shuffling going on, and so we don't have Sarah Curley. We have Cephus, who's a senior physician consultant from NextGen, taking her place. So if you don't see Sarah Curley, that's because we have Cephus. The focus of our discussion today is going to be on the ideal prescription concept. E-prescribing has become arguably the de facto standard of practice, right? And so the focus has changed now from adoption towards making sure we deliver on its complete value proposition. I'm going to quickly introduce the panel, but as we go through the questions, I would ask that you introduce yourself and tell us what you do. We have Kelly Turner. Kelly is a pharmacist, and she is the Director of Clinical Systems at Mercy, basically an Epic affiliated healthcare system. We have Shane Stenner. Shane is an internist from Vanderbilt. He runs the outpatient EHR RxStar program at Vanderbilt. We have Cephus. Cephus is a physician consultant with NextGen, a large EHR system. And then John Arends. John represents Walgreens, and he's all things e-prescribing at Walgreens, our basic point of contact at Walgreens. So I can start with Kelly. Kelly, the first question to you is, can you outline some of the positives that you see with e-prescribing when you compare that against traditional forms of prescription writing?
From a pharmacist perspective, legibility obviously is a key component of the e-prescribing that you receive, as well as, again, on the receiving end from the pharmacy, rarely do we ever get an e-prescribed prescription that's been tampered with by the patient to increase the quantity, or change those dosages. So from a pharmacy perspective, those are very beneficial, as well as having that complete record right there at your fingertips and accessibility for the providers.
Shane?
Well, from a physician perspective, we have an opportunity to deliver clinical decision support right at the point of care, and also to include an audit trail of that kind of decision support, showing your work that you couldn't necessarily force providers to do in a paper world. But now we enable that communication, through the EHR and through e-prescribing from the provider to the pharmacist. It also provides, in addition to basic clinical decision support, it provides us now an opportunity to do advanced things that we couldn't do at all in a paper world, like pharmacogenomic prescribing recommendations that just would be impossible without e-prescribing.
And I'm Dr. Cephus, Allin. I'm an internist. I did, in fact, run a pain clinic for some 5 years. So the introduction of e-prescribing for narcotics, I think, is really quite significant. The difficulties associated with providers accepting this, and the difficulty of identity proofing, which keeps the adoption fairly low, I think is something that Surescripts and EHR vendors can work together on to make for a more the formulary and copay sorts of things, make that more regular so that physicians are not burdened by their EHRs and prescribing, but are in fact have enhancements to their efficiencies.
Yeah, hello, and my name is John Arends. Like Ajit said, I'm the Director of Electronic Prescribing for Walgreens. I'm going to echo a little bit what Kelly said. Absolutely, legibility is fantastic for us pharmacists. Going a little further, even beyond that, just the standardization. We standardize all of our templates to look exactly the same no matter which EHR vendor they come from. And that in and of itself provides benefits. You don't have to look around where does each different EHR vendor put information in different places. All of that goes away with our standardization.
Okay, super. So now that we've talked the good, let's focus on some of the opportunities. I wouldn't call them bad, but opportunities, right? So John, starting from you, what are some of the opportunities you feel are out there in terms of taking e-prescribing to the next level?
I think one of the basic things that we have to tackle as an industry first and foremost is having the prescriptions come through that are internally consistent. And a lot of what we see is directions written one way and then repeated slightly differently within the same prescription. And as pharmacists, we have no choice then but to clarify. We a lot of times we probably know what you mean. We can probably figure it out, but liability, all these different aspects force us to really just make sure absolute clarification. We don't want to be at risk for not having a prescription be paid for, chargebacks, what we call them. And so we just have to just document some of the basic stuff that we really already know or could assume, but because of the environment that we're in, we're just forced to really make these additional outreaches for clarification that we'd rather not be doing. And if we could just button down some of that, a lot of it would go away.
One of the things that I think would be fairly significant is having the whole prescription cycle a lot tighter. So we have a number of different groups, the data providers, people like First Data Bank, formularies, insurance, making sure that all of that data comes in to a prescribed, a EHR, making it so that those things are current, because one of the problems is a lack of currency, particularly things of nature of their insurance and eligibility co-pays. Once it gets to the EHR, then being able to do, as Shane said, being able to do some important checking. So not just to allergies and the sensitivities, but also drug-drug interactions, and of course being able to do things that are in the future, the genomic mapping for those sorts of things. And then, not finally, but part of the series is, of course, the transmission, the Surescripts, being able to have all of that information that is in the EHR come with the prescription and go to the pharmacy, making the full loop, and the pharmacy being able to feed back to people like First Data Bank saying, we don't have enough information, how can you improve your database? So having that cycle of information improve itself so that we can get the one single thing that we want, which is medication of the patient safely and appropriately.
So I'll echo what Cephus said about standardization there. And with the, one of the pain points is that we don't have a single standardized nomenclature for medications, and we have different drug vendors with different naming conventions that leads to lack of standardization there. And so I understand that there's some agreement recently with NCPDP to kind of agree on a handful of maybe subsets that would be similar, but relatively standardized.
Yes.
This is one of the issues that we've, as an EHR, struggled with in trying to reach some of our quality goals for the White Coat of Quality Award. And I think even beyond that, so yeah, e-prescribing and basic e-prescribing is de facto now, but there's not all prescriptions are just simple prescriptions. Providers want to do complex things with medications, and when we try to explain to our users that there's a character limit that's not far off from a tweet, they look at us like we have 3 heads. So I think that as an industry, we have to start to address some of the limitations in the standard and move toward the a structured codified SIG. Internally in our EHR, we've had we have this concept of a structure in our prescriptions that we keep internally, but then when we send a prescription out and get something back for a renewal request, for instance, it's lost, and we have to, that takes users time to try to recodify the SIGs, and so I think there's a good pain point there and a good opportunity to, as an industry, just say, we're going to move forward with structured codified SIG, and it's the right thing to do for what providers need to do. It's the right thing to do for patients.
I'd just like to say one thing.
Absolutely.
The data degradation issue is fundamental to that cycle of getting everybody on the same page. As you're saying, that when we get a refill back, we get data degradation in the sense that it's very much like sending an ASCII file out and having it faxed. Data degradation.
Yep.
We get the same thing in a SIG when it comes back into the EHR in a form that is not replete. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. The other pain point that I would mention is that we struggle with is trying to get our users to actually use the segments as they're intended. There's a certain amount of things that you can do technologically to improve that, but there's always the people and process perspective of trying to train users about how to use the tools appropriately.
Super. Kelly?
So to John's point and the other panelists' points about the discrete versus free text SIGs, and when you append that information to the SIG, it adds it on to the end. And so the training and education to the providers that doesn't replace the original SIG, that is appending that information to the SIG. And so to pay close attention of that final output as to what they're transcribing, just like they would when they were writing the prescription. So appropriate use of those fields and the use of discrete data elements versus free text data elements, and when to use both versus the combination of utilizing both. We've looked at enhancements throughout our system, and on several occasions have gone to our physician leadership and asked if they wanted a hard stop in place when they had discrete and free text elements, and they've pleaded not to put a hard stop limit on that.
Yeah.
But instead we just have a passive warning that indicates, which is easily missed.
Yeah.
And then likewise, when the information comes back, we did look at implementing the codified SIGs within our system, but across 3 different instances that would have to be mapped for every space character that's coming back, for the times that provider would actually change the directions on that refill request. We looked at what other optimizations we can provide our providers instead of just putting 3 FTEs towards SIG mapping.
Yep.
We figured those resources could be better utilized in other optimizations for our providers.
Great. Super.
And I would add, a lot of times when we reach out to the prescriber community for clarification, they're not even aware of some of the items that may get added to the directions. It's coming in on the back end, it's pulling in different information, and it doesn't, they're not even aware of the problem, and it's not malicious, it's not, and I really feel like everyone is acting in good faith and trying to make it better by pulling in some of this extraneous information, but at the end of the day, it does end up getting confusing when we're the only people the pharmacy is one of the few people that see the endpoint. We actually do a lot of work in the pharmacy to clean up the directions, so when we send them back to you as a renewal request, it does make sense. And it's just a little back and forth there.
So, jumping on that theme, I absolutely hear your point. One of the things that, I want to brainstorm with you is there are solutions out there. So, Shane, you talked about standardized drug descriptions, you talked about structured and codified SIG, we talked about Rx norm, and so these are solutions that are out there. However, I don't see any adoption at the pace that we want to see. So, can you comment on what's the rate limiting step? Why are things not happening in terms of making sure these things get deployed, and we move the e-prescribing ball forward? So, anyone?
As far as the Rx norm momentum, I became painfully aware of that back in 2012 when we were alerted to potential mismatches of NDCs. I personally didn't know to the extent that representative NDCs were being utilized across our systems and how that information could get recycled and could come back inappropriately to that provider. So that was really an eye-opening experience to me, and I really do support the Rx norm standards because they are never recycled and they're never deleted, and that would be consistent across the industries. We in fact did switch our environment during that time to only allow Rx norm until we had some other system changes to limit the potential of a recycled NDC being matched within our system. And during that time period, we did turn off NDC matching, but realized that many of our vendors coming in to our systems with that data did not use the Rx norm codification.
And then just to add to that, I understand Epic is now going to be deploying structured codified SIG. And so are you excited about that? Do you have any plans in terms of deploying that across Mercy, and then others can chime in as well?
At this point, what I spoke to earlier, it's a manual process. It's a manual analyst extraction process. So until there's something more systematic that wouldn't need an analyst manual mapping for every different character limitation or every variation that's available out there, we did our analysis, we did our evaluation, and at that point decided our resources are better utilized other places. So until we're able to get it more standard and structured within the system, at that point we'd gladly adopt that.
Shane?
Yeah, we're in an interesting position because we're a homegrown system at an academic center, and we can do innovative things and play around. But at the same time, we've also had, personally, we've had, trying to catch up with industry standards, for meaningful use, et cetera. But with structured codified SIG, we'd love to do it, but it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, because when we looked at it, at potentially doing it, and we had some bandwidth, no one was really ready to receive it or wanting to, it seemed, and so we moved on to other issues.
Yep.
I think it's that's news to me that Epic is planning on doing this.
Yep.
I think really that's the solution. Is just we as an industry need to decide this is the right thing to do for patients, for the system, and we're going to move forward. So. And if we don't, then I'm sure that someone's going to decide that we need to do that anyway.
Well, it's part of the meaningful use stage 3 certification.
Right.
So, if you don't want to do it this way, there is that thing that is coming.
Right.
Any plans on NextGen doing these things? RX norm, structured codified SIG, and so
Well,
forth?
we do have, as most vendors, because our interest is not only satisfying the patient population but the provider population. If the provider population is not satisfied, they'll go to another vendor. And so part of the problem is physician adoption of many things. They don't know what the back end is, and quite frankly, they don't care. There are many things that are not our fault, but are our problem. One of the things is the codified data. One of the things that the industry, which is to say EHR, prescription, pharmacy industry can do is the best practices, sort of the NC PDP sorts of things, making it so that that is required to get through to a pharmacy. I think looking forward to what putting ICD 9, 9, right, thank you. I'm an old physician. ICD, SNOMED, those sorts of things, being able to include those in the bit stream to the pharmacies and to Surescripts. I think we have to be forward-looking because our clientele are not.
Yep. So, John, Walgreens is a big shop, huge development cycles. But talk to us about your plans in terms of doing RX norm or structured codified SIG or standardized drug description. Just because the reason I say that is because obviously you are at the receiving end in terms of new electronic prescriptions. However, when the physicians get refill request, they get the SIGs as free text, and so that's when their complaint is I'm sending you structured data, even though they're not. But on the front end they're seeing us discrete SIG builder tool. On the back end they're sending free text, you're sending your interpretation of that. And so what are your plans around?
So I think one of the big hurdles in the industry is what the changes that I need to be successful have to come from the EHR vendors. And the changes that the EHR and the prescriber vendors need have to come from pharmacy. And so we're both kind of pointing fingers at each other and saying, you guys need to do something different to help us out. And with resources the way they are, constrained resources, technology, deployment cycles, development cycles, as long as they are, it's really hard to gain momentum behind, okay, well, I'll do this for you if you do that for me. It's hard to justify that to leadership when you're trying to get approvals for whatever. In terms of what we're doing, we're actually, and this is actually not necessarily a good thing that we're doing, but we're actually kind of, going off the reservation and actually parsing the data that comes in free text instead of relying on the codification that seems to be slowing. We're going to do it ourselves is what we've decided and said, okay, well, we think we can understand the majority of incoming free text directions. We can parse it. We can codify it ourselves. We can tokenize it, and then we'll use that data internally. And we'll understand if there's missing required elements, we'll treat those differently. If everything's good, we'll let it go through a more seamless process. And so, yes, that's good for us, but it doesn't really move the industry forward anymore because then we're not turning around and giving it back to you codified. And so everyone's kind of doing things a little bit parochially instead of holistically.
All right. So, whenever I talk about ideal e-prescription, so there are two things that come to my mind. One is making things better on the front end and back end. The other thing is end user training, right? So Kelly, me and you have talked offline. You've done some phenomenal work in terms of creating programs to better train your prescribers. Can you inform the audience in terms of what you have done?
Yeah, certainly. A little bit about my background at Mercy, too. I didn't get into that too much in the beginning. I was the lead for the inpatient pharmacy application rollout across Mercy. And at the time I started, we had 3 distinct tracks. There was a clinical track, an ambulatory track, and a revenue track. Since then, we've merged into one clinical track, combining the ambulatory and the clinical tracks, which has really been a blessing where we work together as one clinical team. But early on in our deployments, we were on a fast train going down for implementation, and so our ambulatory team did not have a budget or pharmacy representation on it, and unfortunately I couldn't provide any support to them because we were going down our own track as well. So then shortly after our implementations, it became painfully obvious that we needed to have an integrated team. We worked with our physician champions, our ambulatory counterparts, our pharmacy counterparts to really try and input that education. Our providers were always just struggling to get their job done for the day. Get in, see their patients, get out of the office, click these buttons, these things happen, but not necessarily utilizing the functionality to their fullest potential. So we had done the standard tip sheets and workflow bulletins and little e-learning vignettes. However, when we actually sent our analysts out into those clinics and observed and rounded with those providers and really talked about, show me what your pain points are, we were able to come back into our system and look at what are quick wins we can do with system configuration. So we actually had the click of the month, physician satisfaction saving clicks initiative. Each month we chip away at some of those quick wins, things that we could do. We also utilized that information that we received from our providers and developed a toolkit. We call it a Beyond the Basics toolkit, and getting to those providers from our leaders at specialty councils as well as community leaders, working one-on-one with those providers, going through that checklist, going through those beyond the basics. Here's the newest enhancements within our system. We take code annual major releases every 12 to 18 months, and then weekly optimizations and code installations monthly. So providers get a tip sheet and think, sure, I use this system every day, I know what it's like, it's going to be intuitive. But to really get to that end user and explain to them what the differences are in the functionality and how best to utilize the system, both for their own efficiencies and the accuracy of the data and the throughput of the data throughout those multiple encounters. We've been very successful with that program, hitting our specialty council members and those community leaders. And the ideal is they meet with our analyst, we go through that toolkit and tip sheet with them with those checklists, and then they're able to take it back out to the community providers peer-to-peer and work that toolkit with those providers to help enhance that knowledge base across our ministry.
Super. Shane, Cephus?
Sure. I absolutely agree that an integrated team is critical to successful implementation and training. Some of our challenges have been just communication providers who are busy. We may put up an informational message in our EHR when there's a release of our e-prescribing system with any changes, and those get clicked through. We'll also send emails. Those get clicked through and without being read, and so providers end up using new features and not really knowing how to use them or really being educated about them. We've found success in having the training teams integrated with our development team and being able to get out to our clinics and one-on-one instruct providers to observe, to get feedback, like it sounds like Mercy's doing. The other thing that we have begun doing recently is in-app onboarding. So, little blurbs with pointing to particular features that providers can click through as they're in their workflow, and doesn't take up too much time, but highlights the exact thing that has changed and sort of educates them about them without taking too much time. Time is really critical to providers. The secret ingredient for getting anyone to any kind of training is always food. So we take advantage of that frequently. We've been using our time that we've been getting. We've had these fairs recently for ICD-10 to train providers on ICD-10, but we've been taking advantage of that time a little bit to instruct them about e-prescribing quality as well.
Thank you. See if there's anything to add.
Absolutely. There are a couple of things that I'd like to make note of. One is, large health systems have resources that 1 and 2 doc don't have. So one of the things that I think is important is things like the EHRA working toward making usability standards, making it so that physicians can do things more easily. And if they have a different, if they have an EHR in the hospital, an EHR in their clinic, and maybe an EHR in the nursing home, that they're not so very different. The user interfaces or the required fields are not so very different that they don't have to learn three and remember three different and very disparate ways of putting things in. So things like the EHR initiatives to make it so that all of these things come together, so physicians who use 3 or 5 systems are not overly burdened. I think that's one thing. One of my roles at NextGen and the other physicians is that there are times when physicians, and I won't call out orthopedists or cardiologists, can't hear our trainers. It's one of the reasons the physicians exist at NextGen is that we help train our colleagues, and they will listen to us and be able to hear us better. We also have 20 years of experience, and so when they say, I just can't do this, it's, yes, you can. I know 100 people, I've met with 100 people this week who are in your same boat. I'm an older physician, the hair is not congenital gray, and there are people in my category who find change difficult. And so to the extent that make it easy for them to go from one system to the other, that's things like the EHRA, usability standards, and then having physicians teach physicians, because sometimes they can't hear anybody else.
So John, one of the other things that I have worked in a retail pharmacy environment, so the goal there is to crank the prescriptions out. And so one of the things that I hear from the EHR community and the entire e-prescribing community is we don't know what we don't know. And so what can we do to ensure that pharmacists can report the issues that they face so that everyone in the e-prescribing ecosystem can make the change and make things ultimately better for them?
That's a great question. I really feel like a lot of what we ask for is to collect feedback from all of our, we have 20,000 pharmacists, we have something like 80,000 technicians that work for Walgreens, and so one of my big roles is collecting feedback from all of our leadership, our distributed field leadership, to get that back to us and to aggregate that, and we bring that, really we rely on Surescripts for a lot of that, nice question there, to do that back and forth communication with us so that we can get to the heart of the problem. I feel like one of the things that I do is I make sure I'm in the stores fairly regularly, so I understand. I pick the stores to go visit that have higher eRx volume, and I sit and I work as a pharmacist for 8 hours, so I understand the pain points that they're seeing, so I can stay fresh so that when I go to the industry conferences and the Surescripts conferences, I can say, okay, well, this is what they're trying to do, and this makes my problem worse, this makes my problem a lot better, I'm going to support that. But it just needs to be an open, better dialogue is what we need.
I want to second that from a provider perspective. Similarly, I also practice. I use the tools that we develop in different environments. I practice in a continuity clinic where I see patients, once a week, and then I also work in an acute care clinic where we have, a much higher volume. And you use the tools differently in those environments. And so I learn different things about using the tools. So I think that, that's maybe unique. I'm not sure if there are vendors who, are able to do that and use the tools while they practice. But it's certainly very valuable for us in developing. And, I would hope that vendors could get that kind of feedback directly. Those that are actually helping lead the development could get that feedback.
One of the ways that we get our feedback is we also have 30 retail pharmacies using disparate retail pharmacy systems. So they have a direct in to my team to report problems that they're seeing with providers prescribing, as well as just our ticket maintenance program, where we get tickets in from the providers or just direct emails from our providers telling us, look into this problem, and then we take it the step further to see what system enhancements we can do to help correct that problem or to see if it's a larger problem that we need to correct as well. We also have a retail-based pharmacist who's part of my team that came from Walgreens actually and is real passionate about the e-prescribing quality.
And it's exactly what I do and the other physician consultants do is we go to clinic sites and see where their pain points are. Primary care, what do? We don't cut on people. We give them medications. So seeing how people use the EHR product allows us to come back and since we are part of the vendor, we can make these changes more rapidly. So having people go out into the field is absolutely fundamental to getting valuable feedback to the development area and getting that moving forward in a way that's most helpful.
I would say a great opportunity here would be have some of the cross-functional collaboration. I said, I'm a pharmacist, I use my system. You're a pharmacist, you use your system. You're physicians, you use your systems. Well, we need pharmacists using your systems, or pharmacists telling you, you've got a great model there where you've got both ends. I think a lot of vendors would be well served to have people on the pharmacy side to say, this is where you might be running into pain points. We have a good relationship with a vendor, and they'll shoot us emails and say, this is what we're thinking, how we're going to design it. And we're like, well, that might be confusing if you do that. We'd recommend you do it this other way. Oh, okay, great. And then we move forward, and when we get prescriptions for them for that particular thing that we've consulted on them with, we don't have the pain point that we avoided.
Well, and NextGen, when we have a number of clinics that have on-site pharmacy.
Oh, great. Yeah.
And so that really does help a great deal in terms of being able to say, well, the comments section comes across on the 3rd page. So if you put something there, we might miss it and we might call you. So we can make it so that the providers understand what the other end looks like. And that's fundamental to them not getting a call back from a pharmacist saying, you didn't give me a SIG. Well, yes, I did. It was on the comments, and having that someplace that they weren't working, because they work fast and hard, and if it's not in a place where they're going to see it, then they're going to give us a call. And we're working fast and hard, and if we put it in a place that isn't obvious, it's going to be a problem for both of us.
And you don't know that it's not obvious.
And we don't know that it's not obvious.
And it may be obvious to us, but it may be not obvious to someone else.
Right.
Somebody else. Yep. So I want to focus on 3 message types. One of them is the functionality: Rx change, Rx cancel, and EPCS, which is electronic prescribing of controlled substances. When I go on the field and speak with practicing physicians like you and then pharmacists, I absolutely feel that both these messages need to be implemented, and they should have been implemented yesterday. What are your thoughts around these messages? Change basically is initiated by the pharmacy wanting change of existing prescription therapy, and then cancel is initiated by the prescriber asking the pharmacy to cancel existing therapy on file. So comments from each of you in terms of what do you think should happen, and then why is it not happening, and then what are your plans in terms of your organization? So Kelly?
I can start with the RX cancel message. That was functionality that came available to us with our most recent upgrade that we took in January within our system. And when we started looking at the ability to turn that on, we did a search of all our pharmacy records in our Missouri environment. And within the state of Missouri, we only had 9 pharmacies that are e-prescribed pharmacies that enabled the RX cancel message. So it's similar to the
Chicken and egg, huh?
e-prescribing of controlled substances, that we didn't see a huge adoption until the pharmacists or the receiving pharmacies kind of went over that hump and started to turn that on, that we saw the adoption. I don't necessarily want to go forth and turn on the RX cancel message if it's going to cause a lot of error messages back to my providers that they need to address, that they sent an RX cancel message that wasn't received by the pharmacy. I see great benefit of it because a lot of times the pharmacy is kind of blind into what that provider's intent is if they don't call and cancel that prescription.
Yeah, we would love to implement all of them. Again, it's been a bandwidth issue for us as a small, hospital, not a small hospital, but we're not a large company. So, it's a matter of prioritization. So we plan on tackling EPCS in the next few months, and then on to the next messages. Hopefully by that point, pharmacy systems may be receiving it more broadly in our area, and we won't have those issues. But I don't disagree that they should have been done already, and we'd love to do them. Yeah.
And I guess my perspective on that is that one of the things that would facilitate that from a EHR vendor standpoint would be having the data stream segregated so that we had good normalized information going both ways, so we don't get data degradation with the input and the output message. I think it's important to make it so that the EHR can function the way it's designed, because if our cancel message goes out, but it's just essentially a stream of saying cancel this, that doesn't give the pharmacist as much help as it might. Similarly, if their message their change message comes back to us in a form that is not easily acceptable or parsed into the areas that the EHR can accept, we're going to have to do some fairly fancy footwork, and that usually means that the provider has to do it. So I think one of the things that would make this make adoption easier, making it easier for the vendors, the EHR vendors, is of course absolutely having the NCPDP type guidelines available and enforced, so that we can have data that's valuable both going out and coming back.
John, change, cancel?
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. So Walgreens does not currently support change or cancel. Yeah. We do support EPCS. We started on change and cancel both, and hit the same problem that you got. Yeah. It gets very complicated very quickly, especially for one of the requirements for cancel is accepting a cancel of a handwritten prescription. Mm-hmm. With the electronic prescriptions, it's fine. We got a message ID. We can follow that through the system, find it, no problem. Once we start getting into canceling hard copy prescriptions, it gets very muddy very quickly, very labor intensive on the pharmacist side there. So we ended up abandoning the project while we are rethinking it, and then we are going to then redesign it to be a little bit less development heavy, because a lot of this stuff starts getting very expensive when you start wanting to do, like Walgreens does, as simplistic as for the end user as possible. That means there's a lot of work that has to go on to make all of that seamless to the pharmacist, and it gets, the benefits start going away when the development costs get so high.
Okay, but what I understand is it is in the pipeline, something that you're thinking.
Absolutely. We request it every cycle that we get.
Okay, so, you can take that as a cue and, maybe think about turning that off. Because whenever I go and speak to the pharmacies, they say, well, how many physicians accepted? And then when I go to you say, well, how many pharmacies accepted? So we got to break this chicken and egg and just jump into it. Before I shift subjects, I just want to make sure we're on the same page in terms of a few things that we've discussed, right? We've talked about standardization and codification. So drug prescriptions, Rx norms, structured codified SIG, EPCS. It seems like you are all across the industry in sync in terms of making sure it happens. You support this. It's just a matter of time. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, across all of our medication records, we always took a strong line of using discrete SIGs. Initially, we only had about 200 medication records where we even enabled free text SIGs. And that was your anticoagulants, your anti-seizure meds, your steroid tapers. But over time, we found physicians kind of get pigeonholed into, I only have discrete SIGs available, and if I want to do a half tab or if I want to do different instructions. So just recently, we opened it up to use free text on everything. However, majority of our meds are defaulted to the discrete SIGs.
Shane, I know in the past when me and you had an offline conversation, you mentioned medication history. You had some thoughts around medication history. Do you want to expand?
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the potential advantages of e-prescribing is that now you have the opportunity to learn about medications as a provider that you may not know that the patient has received from other providers or has been filled. If you have the fill message, you may know whether or not the patient actually filled the prescription, which is just something that wouldn't be possible without e-prescribing. But there are challenges. We again haven't fully gone down that road yet, but challenges obviously with integrating existing. We have a hard time keeping track of and integrating medication lists even without that in our system. We have the medication list that the patient says they're taking. We have the medication list of what we think the patient is taking. The medication list of what they're supposed to be taking in the hospital, what we send them home on. Trying to just get that into one list is hard enough, and then saying, well, this is what the PBM says that they've filled, and integrating all that is a grand challenge. So I think that we have a long time to go to sort of figure out how that will all work. But it does add value, I believe. So.
Okay.
That's on.
The physicians that I visited in their clinics, I think one of the things that they really see as valuable is, and valuable to the patient, is in fact the medication reconciliation idea from multiple sources. I'm a primary care physician, internist. I tend to be sort of the spider in the middle of this web. And so being able to be comfortable with the fact that other people may be prescribing medications on the outside is I think one of the great values of an electronic or global electronic system is that if they get methotrexate from a dermatologist, I know that, and that's a very significant sort of thing that they may forget to tell me. And if I get that information before their next visit, if that next visit is 2 months away, they're taking methotrexate, and other people may not be as alert to interactions as the primary care. So I think it's fundamental that we have multiple list reconciliation, which can only be done by e-prescribing. The difficulty in adoption is with narcotics, I think, is the identity proofing, but I think it's just a special example of the difficulty overall of having a very well-defined method for you to provide medications to your patients.
So would like to jump in real quick about medication history. So Walgreens does provide our medication history to Surescripts for aggregation. One of the big challenges that I'm facing is almost on a weekly basis, I get a call or an email from our privacy office with complaints about why were they able to see my medication history? I didn't want them to see that. And the expectation is, everyone remembers the first P in HIPAA for privacy, but no one remembers the portability. And they think there's this perception that even if it's a tiny minority of patients that want to hide or obfuscate what they're doing, makes it really difficult for me to say, okay, well, we're going to take this next step and provide even more interoperability, because it always comes back to us as, well, we have all these privacy complaints about it. And as an organization, Walgreens is very risk averse. When if we having an issue, our natural inclination is avoid it. Don't go down that area. We don't want to go forward with medication history. We don't want to go forward with interoperability because we've had these problems in the past, and it's just nothing but noise from a small minority.
And that's a point of contact issue. That we're the point of contact, or physicians are the point of contact, and we could help with that sort of thing, making it so that we get releases so that information can be aggregated, and that would be something that might be in a script, part of the bit stream that comes across saying this cannot be pushed to a history. It's part of that. It's part of all of us working together.
Yep.
The pharmacy, the vendors, and the database to make an appropriate transmission for all of us.
Now, time, like every time, has quickly sneaked up upon us. So I want to ask if anyone in the audience has one question or one last question or any question before we wrap things up here. Sure.
First of all, thank you for the conversation. It's very, for me, it's useful and eye-opening to listen to you all, sharing your stories and pain points of you dealing with today and going forward. But in the spirit of continuing on the topic of quality improvement in e-prescribing, what is your, this question can apply to you all, what is your near term in the next 6 to 12 months of the top 1 to 2 things that you're going to be focusing on on the on the quality side to make your life and your associate life easier going forward? What would you say that will be the top one or two things?
One of the biggest thing on our horizon is it has to do with the naming of the fields and the terminology of the fields. So duration. Duration is termed for the duration of the life of that prescription versus the dispense quantity. The dispense is 30, 90, however days fill that they want to process. But what we've also found is the mark is long-term functionality and how that plays into the end date. And currently, a discontinued prescription displays the same as an ended prescription or an expired prescription. So we're getting new code here, hopefully within the next couple months, that will distinguish between a discontinued prescription and an expired prescription, having the provider act upon those expired prescriptions more so than those discontinued prescriptions that were intentional. So we're looking forward to that code, and we're going to use that code as an opportunity to re-educate the mark as long-term functionality. We'll look across our medication records and therapeutic classes to identify, are there some we should preset as mark as long-term to save that click for the provider so it's already in the system. So that's just one of our short-range goals, that we can tie a lot of education initiatives and performance improvement capabilities into that one initiative.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, this may be slightly off from the type of question you're asking. One of our biggest focuses right now has been a new feature to help with dosing for pediatric medications based on formulation, sort of milligrams per kilogram type formulations, and using some data from our drug vendor a drug data vendor to give us some variances and ranges so that it's more in line with how providers think about the medication. I want to give, penicillin X number of milligrams, whatever, per kilogram this many times a day, and it then calculates the volume for them, and then we can carry forward sort of that calculation to show to the pharmacist how we arrived at that, instead of our current workflows now require our providers to do that math in their head ahead of time to select a dispensable. It's not a good workflow. So we're focusing on that piece of the quality, and then as we discover things in our reports from Surescripts, looking at specific segments and indicators that we can change.
And I think all vendors are going pretty much the same direction. The pediatric dosing is always a pain point, because pediatricians see a lot of people and are hopefully fairly risk adverse. I think one of the initiatives that we're working on more as much as pediatric dosing is making sure that we have good data that's coming in, so eligibility, insurance, those sorts of things. So our formulary structures can give assistance to the providers who are trying to prescribe rapidly in a day, and the insurance or eligibility can make it so that that's a very slow and frustrating process. So I think speeding up the process by having good data coming in and being able to display that to the provider is one of our major goals.
Perfect.
Next 12 to 18 months for Walgreens, our big push is going to be on standardization. What we're attempting to do is take all of the disparate input and condense it into a single output. And Walgreens loves automation. We're going to try to automate as much as possible. And in addition to that, what we're going to do is when we find any anomalies in the incoming data, we'll shunt it to a different workflow so it'll look meaningfully different to the pharmacy staff on this prescription. Everything checked out okay, it can go on a faster track. This prescription, there were some internal inconsistencies. It needs human intervention. On top of that, we're going to start getting all sorts of metric reports where we're going to be looking in very granular detail all millions of prescriptions that we get on a daily basis and say, this is where we ran into issues and this is why, and we can then start to aggregate all of that data and provide that back to Surescripts and say, here's what we're seeing, this is our pain points.
Perfect. Well, super. This has been a great discussion. I thank you so much for choosing to spend some time with us. And with that, we'll wrap things up.
Thank you.
Thank you.